In fact, Chris Budden, who wrote a book called Following Jesus on Invaded Land, I think, which is a book about Australia and the experience there. I mean, he stopped short of calling his people invaders. But he describes the story that way, and in fact comes close. He doesn't like the word settler because he feels that it suggests a kind of passive settlement. That it in fact isn't a sharp enough word for what happened in the Australian story. But I noticed that he doesn't actually go ahead and call his people invaders. He calls them second peoples. That's why he chooses that word. So we're struggling, right? We're struggling to find ourselves in a story that is bigger than all of us. But I think that we do have to be true to where we come into the story. And then we have to find our way out to in a different place. And I think just to say one last thing, that within Kairos, we've been challenged not to use in solidarity with or in solidarity for because of the othering perspective. That would have been an older way of talking, that we were in solidarity with, as if there were another group of people out there who were not also us. But because Indigenous peoples are part of the church, and they're part of Kairos, and they're part of the movements that we talk about now, working with, working together, working in common cause towards justice and liberation for all of us. And that, for me, is a changed language that I think we can begin to use into the future. Sorry to be long.
Yeah, Jennifer, I'm going to invite you to get together with me and as many people. It was repeated by Ellen, the idea that Indigenous spirituality is a resource. It ain't yours. Okay?
Yeah.
So we got to figure a way to wordsmith that so that it's not imperialist. Because it is a resource, and it's observation as a resource by Victoria Freeman with her friend Dorothy, which she talks about in the introduction to distant relations, how my ancestors colonized North America. It's Dorothy and her walking through the woods, and Dorothy says, well, I'm going to go to Sweat on the weekend. And Victoria says, oh, I don't think I can do it this weekend. And Dorothy turns around, you ain't invited. This is all we have left. Go do research on your own spiritual background and figure out where the disconnects are. So I'm inviting you to, it's the intra-ideological dialogues. And you have to be at a place, the individuals involved have to be at a place that there's enough foundation security that we're working from the scar, not the wound, so that we can come in and not be triggered into defensive responses. And that's what I do in my workshops, by the way. So I'm inviting you to, let's get together and talk about this. Because it's really significant. Where's that inter-ideological space? Because that's the stuff that I'm into.
Thanks. We're just following up on what the DM said, that at Massey College last week, where Victoria Freeman was one of the speakers, were Lee Miracle here, she would say to the gentleman who wants to go into partnership, hell, it's my land, give it back. And with respect to what we should call each other, she said, let the person who is the victim of history get to call the shots. And so that with words, maybe it's not for us to name ourselves. And we might have all kinds of names, some of which might never get printed. But
hi, I'm Sarah. I guess my question is around like what Jennifer was saying, that newcomers, and I myself am a newcomer, and sometimes I struggle to find kind of my place in the story, being as well from a country that was colonized itself, and just sometimes I feel like also the migrant justice community has its own struggles that kind of mirror sometimes the struggles of Indigenous folks, but also very different. And just like, I guess the question is, how do newcomers connect with these issues while at the same time it's hard to like see myself as part of this long legacy and history of oppression and colonization.
That was exactly my question.
Oh,
That's my second.
Well, then we will definitely take a chance to get panelist response. I don't know, Chris?
Yeah,
Experience, right?
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, that question resonates with me. I chuckled a bit when I read the bio for me here, saying that I was born in the country now called the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's true. It's now called the Islamic Republic of Iran, but it too had its own history of, imperialism and conquest that's actually looked back to as a period of the Golden Age, and what we could look back to as Cyrus and Darius and whatnot. I don't have an answer for you because I too have asked these questions of myself in terms of leaving Iran at a very young age, and then immigrating to the United States and becoming a U.S. citizen, and being raised within a white family that had certain privileges with it, but yet at the same time experiencing some impressions of my own, which I still experience basically whenever I go back to the United States, even though I'm a U.S. passport holder. Iran is mentioned in my passport, but birthplace Iran. So, for instance, last weekend I was going home for a brief visit, and I was getting the very third degree from the U.S. immigration. Well, when did you last leave Iran? This type of thing. And, well, do you still speak Farsi? And I'm like, no, I don't speak Farsi. Why is this relevant? All I can say is, in terms of coming full circle and answering the question, is just trying to remain humble and remember my own story and where I came from, and primarily the story of my adoptive family, because the privileges that I grew up with really helped me to be here today, in terms of being able to serve the calling that I have, with CPT. And prior to that, it paved the path for me to go to law school. So I just try humbly as possible to acknowledge that yes, outwardly I'm a person of color, but because of maybe what some would call economic factors, I too need to remember that, and in terms of how that ties into the overall story within Turtle Island, and remembering the story of my adoptive parents, and when that family first first came over. I don't know if you want to hear more, but yeah.
I was going to say, like, in response to some of the comments that have been put forth, I guess, like,